The pain shooting through Anya Solis's arm was nothing compared to the terror clawing at her chest as she huddled in the corner of the bathroom, her phone clutched in her trembling left hand. Blood trickled from her split lip, and she could already feel her right eye swelling shut. Through the thin door, she could hear Byron pacing in the bedroom, his heavy footsteps punctuated by muttered curses. "Anya," he called out, his voice deceptively calm. "Baby, come out. I'm sorry. You know I didn't mean it." She'd heard those words 100 times before, but tonight was different. Tonight, he'd gone too far. Her right arm hung at an unnatural angle, and every shallow breath sent waves of agony through her bruised ribs. She needed help. She needed to get out. With shaking fingers, she pulled up her sister's contact and typed with her left thumb, each letter a struggle through her tears and the pain fogging her brain. "Brenna, please help. Byron broke my arm. I'm scared. He won't let me leave." She hit send and waited, her heart hammering against her bruised ribs. The bathroom door handle rattled. "Anya, don't make this worse. Open the door. We can talk about this." Her phone lit up. Relief flooded through her until she read the response. "Who is this? You have the wrong number." Anya's stomach dropped. "No, no, 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 no." She pulled up the message thread and felt ice water replace the blood in her veins. In her panic, she'd texted a number she didn't recognize. It wasn't even in her contacts. She must have mistyped when her vision blurred from the swelling around her eye. Before she could process this disaster, another message appeared. "Where are you? Are you safe right now?" The voice on the other side of the door changed. Byron's false sweetness evaporated. "I'm going to count to 3, Anya. Then I'm breaking this door down." Her fingers flew across the screen. "Locked in bathroom. 2247 Riverside Apartments, Unit 15. Please don't call police. He'll kill me if cops show up. He's connected." It was true. Byron worked for someone important, someone dangerous. He'd made sure she knew that any attempt to go to the authorities would end badly for her. His boss owned half the police force, or so he claimed. 1. Another message. "I'm sending someone. Do not open that door. Hold on." 2. Anya pressed herself further into the corner, cradling her broken arm. Who had she just texted? What had she done? But did it even matter? She was going to die here tonight in this bathroom at the hands of a man who'd promised to love her forever. 3. The door exploded inward, the flimsy lock no match for Byron's shoulder. He filled the doorway, his face flushed with rage. And something else. Something that looked almost like panic. "Who did you text?" he demanded, stalking toward her. "Who did you text, Anya?" She couldn't answer, couldn't move. He grabbed her broken arm and she screamed, a raw sound that tore from her throat. "I asked you a question." "Wrong number," she gasped out between sobs. "I texted the wrong number, I swear. Please, Byron, please." He released her arm and she crumpled, bile rising in her throat from the pain. He was pacing again, running his hands through his hair, and she realized with a start that he looked afraid. "You stupid bitch. You have no idea what you've done. If anyone finds out about this, if my boss hears that I can't even control my own girlfriend." He didn't finish the sentence, just kicked the bathroom cabinet hard enough to splinter the wood. Through the ringing in her ears, Anya heard something else. A car door slamming, footsteps on the stairs outside, multiple sets, moving fast. Byron heard it too. His head snapped toward the apartment door. "Who did you call?" he asked again, but this time his voice shook. "I told you, wrong number. I don't—" The front door didn't just open. It was removed from its hinges with a single, devastating kick that echoed through the apartment like a gunshot. Anya heard Byron make a sound she'd never heard from him before, a whimper of pure fear. Heavy footsteps entered the apartment. Not running. Just walking with the confidence of someone who had nothing to fear. "Where is she?" The voice was deep, cold, and carried an Irish accent that made each word sound like a promise of violence. Each syllable was measured, controlled, like the man speaking them was holding back something lethal. Look, I don't know who you think you are, but this is my apartment and you need to. The sound of Byron's protest being cut off was meaty and final. Anya heard him hit the wall, heard the breath whoosh from his lungs. I will ask one more time. Where is she? Bathroom, Byron wheezed. Anya tried to stand, but her legs wouldn't cooperate. She managed to pull herself up using the sink just as a man appeared in the bathroom doorway. He was tall, well over 6 feet, with broad shoulders that seemed to fill the entire frame. Dark blonde hair slicked back, steel gray eyes, and a face that looked like it had been carved from stone by someone who understood that beauty and danger weren't mutually exclusive. Intricate tattoos crawled up his neck and covered his hands. He wore a simple dark crew neck shirt that showed off his muscular build, and despite the violence that had just occurred, not a single scratch marred him, though she could see fresh cuts on his knuckles. Those gray eyes swept over her, cataloging every injury with a precision that made her feel simultaneously exposed and protected. His jaw tightened almost imperceptibly when he saw her arm. You sent the message, he said. It wasn't a question. Anya nodded, unable to find her voice. He turned his head slightly, not taking his eyes off her. Rory, get her out of here. Take her to Dr. Gallagher. Tell him I want a full examination and documentation of every injury. A second man appeared, younger, with sandy hair and the same military bearing. He moved toward Anya carefully, as if approaching a wounded animal. Miss, I'm going to help you walk. Is that all right? She nodded again, and Rory's hand closed gently around her good arm, supporting her weight as she stumbled forward. As they passed through the doorway, Anya saw Byron pressed against the wall, held there by the tattooed man's hand around his throat. Byron's feet were barely touching the ground, his face turning purple. Please, Byron gasped. I didn't know. I swear, I didn't know who she was. She's nobody to you, the man said quietly, his Irish accent making the words sound like a death sentence. She was never anything to you. Do you understand? Byron nodded frantically, tears streaming down his face. The man leaned in closer, his voice dropping to a whisper that somehow carried across the room. You're going to disappear from this city, tonight, and if I ever hear your name again, if I ever see your face, if you so much as think about her. He paused, letting the silence stretch. There won't be enough of you left to identify. He released Byron, who crumpled to the floor, gasping and coughing. The man straightened his shirt, his expression never changing from that cold, controlled mask. Then he turned and walked out of the apartment, his footsteps unhurried, as if he'd simply stopped by for a conversation. Rory guided Anya down the stairs and into the cool night air. A sleek black SUV waited at the curb, engine running. He helped her into the back seat, and she sank into the leather, her body finally giving in to the shock and pain. The tattooed man slid into the seat beside her moments later. He pulled out his phone and typed something, then looked at her. I'm Kellen Reardon, he said, his voice softer now but no less commanding. You're safe now. That man will never touch you again. Anya wanted to ask 1,000 questions. Who was he? Why had he come? What was he going to do to Byron? But exhaustion was pulling at her, and the adrenaline that had kept her upright was draining away. Thank you, she whispered, the words barely audible. Kellen's expression didn't change, but something flickered in those steel-gray eyes. Don't thank me yet, he said. We have a lot to talk about. The SUV pulled away from the curb, and Anya watched through the window as her apartment building, and the life she'd been trapped in, disappeared into the darkness behind them. The city lights blurred past in streaks of gold and white as Rory navigated through the late-night streets with practiced ease. Anya sat in silence, cradling her broken arm against her chest, acutely aware of Kellen Riordan sitting beside her. He hadn't spoken since his cryptic warning about having a lot to talk about. Instead, He'd pulled out his phone and was typing rapidly, his tattooed fingers moving across the screen with surprising dexterity. She stole glances at him from the corner of her good eye, trying to understand who this man was. Everything about him screamed danger, from the intricate ink covering his skin to the cold precision with which he'd handled Byron. Yet his voice when he'd spoken to her had been almost gentle, and the way he'd assessed her injuries had felt protective rather than invasive. "How's the pain?" Kellen asked without looking up from his phone. "Manageable," Anya lied. In truth, her arm was throbbing in time with her heartbeat, and every bump in the road sent fresh waves of agony through her ribs. Kellen's eyes flicked to her face, and she had the distinct impression he knew she was lying. "Dr. Gallagher will take care of you. Best orthopedic surgeon in the city." He returned his attention to his phone. "Owes me a favor." Anya wanted to ask what kind of favor, wanted to ask why he was helping her, wanted to ask what he'd meant when he told Byron to disappear from the city, but her throat felt tight, and the questions seemed too big for the confined space of the car. 20 minutes later, the SUV pulled up to a discreet entrance on a tree-lined street in what was clearly a wealthy neighborhood. The buildings here were old brick, restored and maintained with obvious care. Nothing like the crumbling complex she'd just left behind. Rory came around to help her out, supporting her weight as they walked through a door marked only with a small brass plaque that read, "Gallagher Medical Group." Inside, the clinic was quiet and immaculate. Soft lighting, cream-colored walls, and the faint scent of antiseptic that somehow managed not to smell clinical. A woman in navy scrubs appeared immediately, her expression professionally neutral. "Mr. Reardon," she greeted Kellen with a small nod. "Dr. Gallagher is waiting in examination room 3. They were led down a hallway and into a spacious room where an older man with silver hair and kind eyes stood waiting. He looked at Anya with the sort of calm assessment she imagined he'd perfected over decades of practice. "Miss Solis," he said gently, "I'm Dr. Gallagher. Let's get you taken care of." Kellen stepped back, positioning himself near the door. "Full examination," he said to the doctor. "And I need documentation. Photographs, x-rays, everything." Dr. Gallagher nodded, and Anya felt a chill run through her. Documentation, evidence. This wasn't just about treating her injuries. This was about building a case, creating a record. But a case for what? Against who? The examination was thorough but surprisingly gentle. Dr. Gallagher's hands were steady as he checked her ribs, her jaw, the swelling around her eye. A nurse came in to assist, taking photographs with a medical-grade camera that captured every bruise, every cut, every mark Byron had left on her skin. Anya felt exposed and vulnerable, but the staff moved with such quiet efficiency that she didn't have time to feel embarrassed. The x-rays confirmed what she already knew. Clean break of the radius, 2 cracked ribs. Dr. Gallagher set her arm with careful precision, fitting her with a sleek black cast that looked nothing like the bulky white plaster she'd expected. The whole process took less than an hour, and through it all, Kellen remained by the door, silent and watchful. When they were finished, Dr. Gallagher handed her a small bottle of pills. "For the pain, take one every 6 hours as needed. The ribs will heal on their own, but you'll need to come back in 6 weeks for the cast." He hesitated, then added more quietly, "If you need anything at all, you call this clinic, day or night." Anya nodded, clutching the pill bottle like a lifeline. Back in the SUV, Rory drove them through streets that grew progressively quieter and more exclusive. Anya had lived in this city her whole life, but she'd never been to this part of town. The buildings here were set back from the street, protected by gates and high walls. Old money, the kind that didn't need to advertise itself. They pulled up to a modern building, all glass and steel, with a security gate that opened automatically as they approached. Rory parked in an underground garage, and they took an elevator that required a keycard to operate. Anya's exhaustion was catching up with her now. The pain medication Dr. Gallagher had given her, making everything feel slightly distant and dreamlike. The elevator opened directly into an apartment, and Anya stepped out into a space that took her breath away. It was open and airy, with large windows that overlooked the city lights. The furniture was contemporary but comfortable, all clean lines and neutral tones. The kitchen gleamed with stainless steel appliances she'd only ever seen in magazines. Everything about it screamed security and expense. "This is your place for now," Kellen said, watching her take it in. "Rory will stay in the guest room tonight. Make sure you have everything you need." Anya turned to face him, finally finding her voice. "I don't understand. Why are you doing this? I don't even know who you are." Kellen studied her for a long moment, his steel gray eyes unreadable. "You texted me for help, I don't ignore that." He moved toward the door, then paused. "Get some rest. We'll talk tomorrow." "Wait," Anya said, her voice stronger now despite her exhaustion. "What about Byron? What are you going to do to him?" Something dark flickered across Kellen's face. "He's already gone, left the city an hour ago. He won't be back." "How can you be so sure?" Kellen's expression softened slightly, though his eyes remained hard. "Because men like Byron only understand one thing: power. And he understands now that I have more of it than whoever he thought he was working for." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a sleek black phone, placing it on the kitchen counter. "This is for you. My number's already programmed in. If you need anything, you call." Before she could respond, he was gone, the elevator doors closing behind him with a soft chime. Anya stood alone in the beautiful, secure apartment, surrounded by luxury she'd never dreamed of, and felt the weight of everything that had happened crash over her. She'd escaped Byron, but she'd done it by placing herself in the debt of a man who could make people disappear with a phone call, a man whose very presence commanded fear, a man whose name she'd only learned an hour ago. Rory appeared from one of the other rooms, his expression kind. "There are clothes in the bedroom, Miss Solis. Everything you might need. Why don't you get some rest?" Anya nodded numbly and made her way to the bedroom. Inside, she found a bed that looked like a cloud, fresh clothes laid out on a chair, and through another door, a bathroom stocked with every toiletry imaginable. She caught sight of herself in the mirror, her face battered and swollen, her arm in its black cast, and barely recognized the woman staring back at her. Who was Kellen Reardon? And what had she gotten herself into? The questions haunted Anya through a restless night. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw Byron's face turning purple as Kellen held him against the wall. Every time she started to drift off, she heard that cold Irish voice promising violence with such controlled precision. The pain medication kept the worst of the physical agony at bay, but her mind wouldn't settle. When morning light finally filtered through the unfamiliar windows, Anya found herself staring at a ceiling she didn't recognize, in a bed that probably cost more than 6 months of her old rent. The apartment was silent, except for the distant sounds of the city waking up below. She sat up carefully, her ribs protesting the movement, and noticed the black phone Kellen had left on the nightstand. Someone must have brought it in while she slept. The screen showed 8:47 a.m. She'd actually slept longer than she'd thought. A soft knock on the door made her tense. "Miss Solis?" Rory's voice came through, respectful and distant. "I've made breakfast. Whenever you're ready." Anya found him in the kitchen, setting out fresh coffee and what looked like an impressive spread of food: toast, eggs, fruit, yogurt. The kind of breakfast she used to see in hotel advertisements. "How are you feeling?" he asked, his tone genuinely concerned. "Like I got hit by a truck," Anya admitted, accepting the coffee he poured for her. "But better than last night." Rory nodded, then gestured to a shopping bag on the counter. "Mr. Reardon had some essentials sent over: clothes, toiletries, anything you might need for the next few days. He wanted to make sure you were comfortable. There it was again, that careful consideration from a man who'd removed a door from its hinges without breaking a sweat. Anya sipped her coffee, trying to reconcile the violence she'd witnessed with these thoughtful gestures. She was halfway through her eggs when the black phone vibrated on the counter. Anya picked it up, her pulse quickening. "How did you sleep?" The message was from a number saved simply as Kellen. Direct, no preamble. She stared at the screen for a moment, then typed back with her good hand. "Better than expected. Thank you for all of this." The response came quickly. "You don't need to thank me. Have you taken your medication this morning?" Anya glanced at the pill bottle she'd left on the counter. She hadn't yet. "About to." "Good. Rory will stay as long as you need him. If you want privacy, just say the word." She looked up at Rory, who was methodically cleaning the kitchen with the same quiet efficiency he seemed to apply to everything. Having someone else in the apartment felt both intrusive and comforting. She wasn't sure she wanted to be alone yet. "He's fine. Can I ask you something?" "Anything." Anya hesitated, her fingers hovering over the screen. There were so many questions, but one kept pushing to the forefront. What happened to Byron? Really happened? This time, the response took longer. Anya watched the 3 dots appear and disappear twice before the message finally came through. "He's gone and took the first bus out of the city at 3 a.m., left behind his phone, his keys, everything. He won't be back." "How can you be sure?" "Because I explained very clearly what would happen if he ever set foot in this city again. Men like Byron are cowards. They only hurt people weaker than them. He knows now that he's the weak one." Anya felt something shift in her chest. Not quite relief, but close. She'd spent 3 years terrified of Byron's connections, his supposed power. And in one night, Kellen had reduced him to nothing. What about his boss? The one he always said would protect him? There was no boss. Byron worked as a low-level runner for a local crew. Petty criminals, small-time dealers. They have no real power, and they sure as hell don't protect men who beat women. I made some calls last night. They want nothing to do with him. Anya's hands started shaking. 3 years. 3 years of being told she couldn't leave, couldn't go to the police, couldn't tell anyone because Byron's connections would destroy her. And it had all been a lie. An elaborate trap built on fear and isolation. He lied about everything. Yes, that's what abusers do. They make you believe you have no options, no way out. They make themselves bigger than they are. She set the phone down, pressing her good hand against her mouth as the reality washed over her. All that time, all that suffering, for nothing. She'd been a prisoner of her own manufactured fear. The phone vibrated again. "Anya? Are you okay?" She picked it up, blinking back tears. "I don't know. I'm angry. At him. At myself. Don't be angry at yourself. None of this was your fault. You did what you had to do to survive. I should have left sooner, should have seen through his lies. You sent that text. That took more courage than you realize. You saved yourself. I just helped finish it." Anya read the message 3 times, something warm unfurling in her chest despite the pain and confusion. She typed out another question, the one that had been nagging at her since last night. "Why did you come yourself? You could have just sent Rory and the others. Why did you come?" The 3 dots appeared immediately, then disappeared. Appeared again. It was several minutes before the response finally came. "I had to confirm you weren't a trap. Wrong number messages can be setups, ways to get people into vulnerable positions. I needed to see for myself. And I needed to know you were real, that someone was actually in danger and not just playing games." Anya stared at the screen, trying to read between the lines of his careful words. What if I hadn't been real? What if it was a trap? Then the night would have ended very differently for whoever said it. The casual way he acknowledged the violence he was capable of should have terrified her, should have sent her running despite her injuries. But instead, Anya found herself fascinated. This man who could promise death with such calm certainty had spent the night making sure she had medical care, a safe place to sleep, and breakfast in the morning. "Why do you care what happens to me? You don't even know me." The response came faster this time. "I know you were brave enough to ask for help. I know you survived something that breaks a lot of people. That's enough." Anya felt her throat tighten. She'd spent so long believing she was weak, believing she deserved what Byron did to her because she stayed. But Kellen saw something different. He saw strength where she'd only seen failure. "Thank you. For everything. For coming. For helping. For this. You already thanked me. Stop thanking me." Despite everything, Anya smiled. "What am I supposed to do now? Rest. Heal. Let me handle the rest. And then what? Then we figure out what comes next. Together." The word "together" lingered on the screen, promising something Anya couldn't quite name. She set the phone down and looked around the beautiful apartment, at Rory working quietly in the kitchen, at the black cast on her arm that somehow felt less like a symbol of her breaking and more like evidence of her survival. She didn't know who Kellen Reardon was. Not really. But for the first time in 3 years, she wasn't afraid. And that cautious lack of fear felt almost like hope. The days passed in a strange, suspended quiet. Anya spent most of her time in the apartment, healing. Rory came and went with silent efficiency, always there when she needed something but giving her space when she didn't. The black phone became her lifeline to the outside world, particularly to the man who'd saved her life. Kellen texted her every morning and every evening. Simple check-ins at first. "How's the pain? Did you sleep? Have you eaten?" Questions that felt almost clinical in their directness. But gradually the messages became longer. He'd ask what she was reading, what she was thinking about. She'd tell him about the books Rory had brought her, about the view from the windows, about the strange adjustment to feeling safe. On the 5th day, he texted something different. "I'm coming by tonight, around 7. Is that okay?" Anya stared at the message, her heart rate picking up. They'd been communicating through text for days, but the thought of seeing him again in person made her nervous in a way she couldn't quite explain. "Of course. Should I tell Rory to make dinner?" "No, I'll bring something." At exactly 7 o'clock, the elevator chimed. Anya had changed 3 times, finally settling on a simple navy sweater and jeans from the clothes that had mysteriously appeared in her size. She'd even managed to do something with her hair despite the cast making everything awkward. Kellen stepped out of the elevator carrying 2 brown paper bags that smelled incredible. He was dressed more casually than the night he'd rescued her, in dark jeans and a black Henley that showed off his tattooed forearms. His hair was slightly damp, like he'd just showered. Those steel gray eyes found hers immediately, and she saw something soften in his expression. "You look better," he said, setting the bags on the kitchen counter. "The swelling's gone down." "Dr. Gallagher knew what he was doing," Anya replied, watching as Kellen unpacked the bags. Containers of what looked like homemade soup, fresh bread, a simple salad. Nothing fancy or expensive, just good, nourishing food. "My mother's recipe," Kellen said, ladling the soup into bowls. "She always said chicken soup could fix anything. I'm not convinced it works on broken bones, but it can't hurt." The mention of his mother surprised her. It was the first personal detail he'd offered. "You cook?" "When I have time." He handed her a bowl and gestured to the dining table. "Which isn't often, but I make exceptions." They sat across from each other, and for a few minutes, they ate in comfortable silence. The soup was delicious, rich and warming, with tender pieces of chicken and vegetables that had been simmered for hours. It tasted like care, like someone had put thought and time into making it. "This is amazing," Anya said finally. Kellen's lips quirked in what might have been a smile. "Don't sound so surprised. I just didn't expect a man who breaks down doors to also make soup. People are complicated." He tore off a piece of bread. "So are you going to tell me about yourself, or do I have to guess?" Anya set down her spoon, caught off guard by the directness. What do you want to know? Everything. Start with what you did before Byron. She took a breath, realizing she hadn't talked about her old life in years. Byron had systematically cut her off from everyone who knew the person she used to be. I was an archivist at the city library. I worked in the special collections department, preserving old documents, cataloging historical records. It was quiet work, but I loved it. Every piece of paper had a story. Why past tense? Byron made me quit 2 years ago, said I was spending too much time there, that the hours were inconvenient. Really, he just didn't like that I had something that was mine. The bitterness in her voice surprised her. Kellen listened without interrupting, his full attention on her in a way that felt almost overwhelming. No one had looked at her like this in years, like what she said actually mattered. What would you do now? If you could do anything? He asked. Anya looked down at her soup, feeling the old dream stir in her chest. I always wanted to be a counselor, specifically for troubled youth. Kids who are going through difficult situations, who need someone to listen without judgment. I got my degree in psychology before I met Byron, but I never finished my master's, never got licensed. She laughed softly, sadly. Seems ironic now. I wanted to help people in bad situations, and I couldn't even recognize I was in one myself. That's not irony, that's survival. Kellen's voice was firm. You did what you had to do, and that dream doesn't have to stay a dream. Anya looked up at him, searching his face. You say that like it's simple. It's not simple, but it's possible. He leaned back in his chair, and for the first time she saw something guarded in his expression. I know something about families and expectations and paths that get chosen for you instead of by you. What do you mean? Kellen was quiet for a moment, his fingers drumming once against the table. My family has been in certain businesses for 3 generations. My grandfather started it, my father expanded it, and now it's mine. Some of it's legitimate. Property development, import-export, a few restaurants. But a lot of it exists in the gray areas the law doesn't look at too closely. Anya's pulse quickened. She'd suspected, of course. You didn't make people disappear by being a businessman, but hearing him say it out loud made it real. You're talking about organized crime. I'm talking about a family business that operates by different rules than most. He met her eyes steadily. I'm not going to lie to you, Anya. What I do isn't legal. I have people who work for me, who depend on me. I make decisions that keep them safe and keep the business running. And sometimes those decisions involve violence. Like with Byron. Byron was nothing, a coward who got what he deserved. Kellen's jaw tightened. But yes, like with Byron, I have one absolute rule that I will never break, no matter what. I don't tolerate men who hurt women. Not in my organization, not in my city, not anywhere I have influence. My father beat my mother for years before he died. I watched her try to hide the bruises, try to pretend everything was fine. I was 16 when I finally got big enough to stop him. Anya's breath caught. What happened? He came at her one night, drunk and angry about something. I got between them, told him if he ever touched her again, I'd kill him. Kellen's voice was flat, emotionless. He died of a heart attack 6 months later. Natural causes, the doctors said. But I meant what I told him, and he knew it. The silence stretched between them, heavy with shared pain. Anya understood now why he'd come himself that night, why he'd moved so quickly. This wasn't just about helping a stranger. This was personal. So when you got my text, she said slowly, it wasn't just a wrong number. No, it was a chance to do what I couldn't do fast enough for my mother, to stop it before it got worse. He looked at her with an intensity that made her chest tight. I don't regret what I did to Byron. I don't regret bringing you here. And I won't apologize for the life I lead because it's who I am. But I need you to understand what being in my world means. What does it mean? It means protection, absolute, total protection. No one will ever hurt you again, but it also means danger. I have enemies, people who would use anything I care about against me. If you stay in my life, if you let me help you rebuild, you become part of that world, part of that risk. Anya looked at this man who'd saved her life, who made his mother's soup recipe, who'd watched his father hurt someone he loved and had become powerful enough to make sure it never happened again. The smart thing would be to thank him and walk away, to take the second chance he'd given her and disappear into a normal life. But nothing about her life had been normal for 3 years. And Kellen was offering her something she'd thought she'd lost forever. A purpose. A future. Maybe even a chance to become who she'd always wanted to be. I'm already part of it, she said quietly. The moment I sent that text, I chose this. I chose you. Something flickered in Kellen's eyes, something that looked almost like relief. Then we move forward. Together. The words hung in the air between them, a promise and a commitment wrapped into one. Kellen reached across the table and refilled her water glass, the gesture simple but attentive. Anya watched his tattooed hands move, noticing the faded scars on his knuckles, the evidence of a life lived outside the boundaries of normal society. There's more you need to know, Kellen said, settling back in his chair. About Byron. About why he's really gone. Anya felt her stomach tighten. You said he was small-time, that he lied about his connections. He did. But I want you to understand the full scope of it, so you know exactly how safe you are. Kellen's voice was measured, patient. Byron worked as a runner for a crew called the Riverside Boys, and I use the term crew loosely. They're barely organized, mostly young guys moving small amounts of product, running minor scams, street-level stuff, nothing sophisticated. But he said his boss owned half the police force. His boss is a man named Tommy Vega. Tommy runs a poker game out of a bar in the East End and sells stolen electronics on the side. He doesn't own anyone. He pays off one traffic cop to look the other way when they use the back room for cards. Kellen's expression hardened slightly. Byron took that one dirty cop and turned it into a story about unlimited power. He made you believe that going to the police would get you killed, that he had protection at every level. Anya felt the familiar burn of anger rising in her chest. 3 years. I stayed for 3 years because I thought if I left, if I tried to get help, his people would find me. I know. And that's exactly what he wanted you to think. Kellen leaned forward, his eyes intense. Abusers are experts at isolation. They cut you off from friends, from family, from anyone who might tell you the truth. Then they build a prison out of fear and lies. Byron's prison was convincing you he was more powerful than he actually was. How do you know all this? About Tommy Vega and the Riverside Boys? Because I make it my business to know everyone operating in this city, every crew, every independent, everyone who thinks they can run a game without my knowledge. Kellen's tone was matter-of-fact, not boastful. The Riverside Boys are nothing. They exist because I allow them to exist. They stay small, they don't hurt civilians, and they don't cross into territory that matters. The moment they break those rules, they're done. Anya processed this information, feeling something shift inside her. The monster Byron had built himself up to be was crumbling, revealing the pathetic reality underneath. What did you say to Tommy Vega? About Byron? I didn't say anything to Tommy. I spoke to his younger brother Danny, who actually runs most of their operations, told him one of his runners had put his hands on a woman and that the runner needed to disappear permanently. Danny was apologetic, cooperative. Said they don't tolerate that kind of behavior. Kellen's lips curved in something that wasn't quite a smile. He was telling the truth. They're idiots, but they're not completely without standards. So Byron just left? That easily? I explained to Byron that if he stayed in the city, I would find out. And if I found out, What happened in your apartment would look gentle compared to what came next. I also explained that Tommy Vega's crew had cut him loose, that he had no protection, no connections, nothing. He was alone and he knew it. Kellen met her eyes steadily. Byron is a coward, Anya. Cowards run when they're outmatched. He's gone, and he won't be back, ever. The relief that washed over Anya was physical, making her hands shake slightly. All that fear, all that paralyzing terror that had kept her trapped, had been built on lies. Byron had been a small-time criminal playing pretend, and she'd believed him because she'd been isolated enough to have no other perspective. "I was so stupid," she whispered. "No." Kellen's voice was sharp enough to make her look up. "You were abused. There's a difference. Abuse rewires your brain, makes you doubt everything you know about yourself and the world. You weren't stupid. You were surviving the only way you knew how." Anya blinked back tears, nodding. She took a shaky breath and asked the question that had been building since he'd started explaining. "You keep talking about the city like it's yours, about allowing crews to exist, about knowing everyone who operates." She studied his face, seeing the careful control there. "You're telling me you're a family boss? Like in the movies?" Kellen didn't flinch from the question. "Yes and no. The movies get some things right and a lot of things wrong. I run the Reardon organization. We control most of the significant operations in this city, both legitimate and otherwise. I have captains who manage different territories and different businesses. I have soldiers who handle enforcement. And I have a network of people who provide information, protection, and services. Services like making people disappear. When necessary." He didn't apologize for it. "My family has been doing this for 3 generations. My grandfather came over from Ireland with nothing and built an empire from the ground up. My father expanded it, made connections, established territory. And when he died, it came to me." Anya tried to wrap her mind around it. The man sitting across from her, the one who'd brought her homemade soup, controlled an entire criminal organization. "How old were you?" 22, still in university, studying business because my father insisted I get a legitimate education." Kellen's expression darkened slightly. "He died, and suddenly I had 50 men looking to me for leadership, for direction. I had rivals circling, thinking a kid couldn't possibly hold his father's territory. I had to prove them wrong quickly and decisively." "Did you?" "I'm still here. They're not." He said it simply, without drama, a fact, not a boast. "I spent the first 2 years consolidating power, making it clear that the Reardon name still meant something. The next 3 expanding our legitimate operations, giving us cover and respectability, and the last 5 maintaining the balance, keeping my people safe, keeping our territory secure, dealing with threats before they become problems." Anya leaned back in her chair, trying to reconcile everything she was hearing. "And you do all this while also rescuing women who send you wrong numbers?" Something almost like humor flickered across Kellen's face. "That was a first, actually. But it won't be the last time I intervene when I see someone being hurt. I meant what I said. I have one absolute rule, and it's not negotiable. No hurting women. No hurting women, no children, no innocents." His voice hardened. "I'm not a saint, Anya. I've done things that would horrify you. I've made decisions that cost people their lives. But I have lines I won't cross, and I make sure everyone who works for me knows where those lines are." The apartment was quiet, except for the distant sound of traffic below. Anya looked at this man who'd saved her, who'd given her safety and care, who was now laying out the truth of his life with unflinching honesty. She should be terrified, should be planning her escape. But instead, she felt something close to understanding. "Why are you telling me all of this?" she asked. "You could have just kept helping me without explaining who you really are." "Because I don't want you to figure it out later and feel like I lied to you." Kellen's gaze was steady, sincere. If we're moving forward together, if I'm going to help you rebuild your life, you need to know exactly who I am and what that means. I won't hide it from you. I won't pretend to be something I'm not. Anya thought about Byron, who'd hidden his true nature until it was too late, who'd shown her kindness until she was isolated enough that the violence could start. Kellen was offering the opposite: full disclosure, complete honesty, even when the truth was dark. "So you're a crime boss who makes soup and saves strangers," she said slowly, "and you want to help me become a counselor for troubled youth." "I want to help you become whatever you want to be." Kellen's voice softened slightly. "The foundation I mentioned, the legitimate businesses, they're not just for show. I actually care about them. One of them is a youth outreach program in the South End. We provide after-school programs, counseling services, job training, all above board, all genuinely helpful." Anya's breath caught. "You're serious?" "Completely. And they need someone to coordinate their counseling services. Someone who understands what it's like to come from difficult circumstances. Someone who actually gives a damn." He paused. "Someone like you." 6 weeks later, Anya sat in Dr. Gallagher's examination room while he carefully removed the cast from her arm. The black fiberglass had become a familiar weight, a constant reminder of the night that had changed everything. Now, as the saw whirred and the material fell away, she felt oddly vulnerable without it. "Looks good," Dr. Gallagher said, examining her arm with gentle, practiced hands. "The bone healed cleanly. You'll need physical therapy to rebuild strength, but structurally, you're perfect." He smiled at her kindly. "You've come a long way, Miss Solis." He wasn't just talking about the arm, and they both knew it. The woman who'd stumbled into his clinic 6 weeks ago, broken and terrified, barely resembled the person sitting here now. The swelling had long since faded. The bruises had turned from purple to green to yellow before disappearing entirely. Her split lip had healed without scarring. Physically, the evidence of Byron's violence was almost gone. Emotionally, things were more complicated. Anya had spent the past 6 weeks in the secure apartment, healing and slowly rebuilding the sense of self that Byron had systematically destroyed. Kellen had been present but not overwhelming, visiting twice a week with food and conversation. They'd talked about everything from books to childhood memories to the complicated ethics of his world. He'd never pushed, never demanded more than she was ready to give. Rory had moved out after the first week, once Anya felt safe being alone. But he checked in daily, always available if she needed anything. The apartment had become her sanctuary, a place where she could breathe without fear for the first time in years. She'd also reconnected with Brenna. Her sister had cried for 20 minutes straight when Anya finally called, apologizing over and over for not realizing what was happening, for letting Byron isolate them. They'd met for coffee 3 times now, slowly rebuilding the relationship that Byron had worked so hard to destroy. Brenna didn't ask too many questions about how Anya had escaped or who was paying for the apartment. She just seemed grateful to have her sister back. Now, looking at her bare arm in the fluorescent light of the examination room, Anya felt like she was shedding the last physical evidence of her old life. Dr. Gallagher gave her exercises to do, instructions for rebuilding muscle strength, and a follow-up appointment in a month. When she walked out of the clinic, Kellen was waiting in the SUV, Rory behind the wheel. It had become routine, this careful attention, this protective presence. Kellen slid over to make room for her in the back seat. "How does it feel?" he asked, nodding to her arm. "Strange, light." She flexed her fingers experimentally. "Like it belongs to someone else. It'll take time to adjust." He was quiet for a moment as Rory pulled into traffic. "Are you free this evening? There's something I want to discuss with you." Anya's stomach fluttered with nerves. Over the past weeks, she'd been waiting for this conversation, knowing it was coming, but not sure when. Of course. That evening, Kellen arrived at 7 with Thai food and a manila folder. They ate first, making small talk about her physical therapy plan and a book she'd been reading. But Anya could sense something different in him tonight, a seriousness beneath his usual controlled calm. After they'd cleared the plates, Kellen set the folder on the table between them. "I told you about the Northside Youth Foundation," he said, "the outreach program we run in the South End. You mentioned it." Anya's heart started beating faster. "It's been operating for 5 years now. We offer after-school programs, tutoring, sports, art classes, all free. We serve about 200 kids from the neighborhood, most of them from difficult backgrounds, single-parent homes, poverty, some dealing with abuse or neglect." He opened the folder, revealing glossy photos of smiling children, program schedules, financial reports. "The foundation is completely legitimate. Every dollar is accounted for. Every employee is properly licensed and vetted. It's not a front, it's real." Anya leaned forward, studying the photos. Kids of all ages, engaged in activities, laughing, learning, exactly the kind of work she'd dreamed of doing. "Last month, our counseling coordinator left. She got a job offer across the country, better pay, closer to family. We've been looking for a replacement." Kellen met her eyes. "I want to offer you the position." The words hung in the air, everything Anya had hoped for and feared. "Kellen, I'm not licensed. I never finished my master's degree." "The position doesn't require licensure. You'd be coordinating services, not providing therapy directly. You'd work with licensed counselors, schedule sessions, manage intake, connect kids with the resources they need. And if you want to go back to school, finish your degree, the foundation would cover the cost." Anya felt tears prick her eyes. This was everything. The chance to do meaningful work, to help kids who needed it, to rebuild the career Byron had forced her to abandon. "Why me?" "Because you understand." Kellen's voice was gentle but firm. "You know what it's like to feel trapped, to feel like there's no way out. Those kids need someone who gets it on a fundamental level, someone who won't give up on them." He paused. "And because I think you're stronger than you realize. I've watched you recover, watched you put yourself back together. That takes real courage." "I don't know what to say." "Don't say anything yet." Kellen's expression grew serious, his jaw tightening slightly. "Because there's something you need to understand before you accept. This isn't just a job offer. This is me asking you to enter my world fully, permanently." Anya felt her breath catch. "What do you mean?" "The foundation is mine. Everyone knows it. The staff, the community, the families we serve. They know it's funded by the Reardon organization. They don't care because we actually help, because we deliver on our promises. But it also means that anyone who works there is associated with me, with my name, with my family." "I'm already associated with you," Anya pointed out. "You saved me. You've been helping me." "That's different." Kellen leaned forward, his steel-gray eyes intense. "Right now, you're someone I helped, someone I protected during a crisis. If you take this job, if you work for my foundation, you become part of my organization. Not the criminal side, but connected nonetheless. And that comes with risks." "What kind of risks?" "I have enemies, Anya. Other families, rivals, people who would love to see me weakened or destroyed. They can't touch me directly, so they look for softer targets. People I care about, people who matter to me." His voice was steady but serious. "If you accept this job, if you let me into your life this way, you become one of those potential targets." Anya felt cold fear trickle down her spine, but also something else, something that felt almost like defiance. "You're saying someone might come after me to get to you." "I'm saying it's possible. Not likely, because I have extensive security measures in place. Not easy, because anyone who tried would have to deal with me and everyone who works for me. But possible." Kellen held her gaze. "I won't lie to you about the danger. The protection I can offer is absolute. No one touches you without going through me first, but the danger is real. The apartment was silent except for the sound of their breathing. Anya thought about the past 6 weeks, about the safety she'd felt for the first time in years. She thought about Byron, about the manufactured fear he'd used to control her. This was different. Kellen wasn't trying to scare her into submission. He was giving her a choice, making sure she understood the full scope of what she was choosing. "What if I say no?" she asked quietly. "Then nothing changes between us. I keep helping you, keep making sure you're safe. You find another job, rebuild your life your own way. We stay friends." His expression softened slightly. "I won't be offended. I won't be angry. I'll understand completely. But if I say yes, then you're mine to protect, fully, completely, permanently. You work for my foundation, you help those kids, you rebuild your career, and I make sure nothing ever hurts you again." His voice dropped lower. "But you have to go into this with your eyes open. You have to understand what you're accepting." Anya looked down at her newly freed arm, at the pale skin that had been hidden under the cast for weeks. She thought about the woman who'd sent that desperate text, who'd believed she had no options, no future. That woman was gone. In her place was someone stronger, someone who'd survived and was ready to do more than just exist. "I accept," she said, meeting Kellen's eyes. "The job, the risks, all of it." Something shifted in Kellen's expression. A flash of emotion quickly controlled but unmistakable. Relief, satisfaction, and something deeper that Anya couldn't quite name. He reached across the table and took her hand, his tattooed fingers warm against hers. "Then we start Monday." 3 months passed in a blur of purpose and growth. Anya threw herself into the work at Northside Youth Foundation with an intensity that surprised even her. The building itself was modest but well-maintained, a converted community center in a neighborhood that had seen better days. But inside, it was alive with energy and hope. She coordinated services for nearly 200 kids, matching them with counselors, scheduling sessions, managing intake paperwork, and most importantly, actually listening to them. The children came from backgrounds she understood too well: poverty, instability, abuse, neglect. They were suspicious at first, testing her boundaries, waiting for her to give up on them like so many adults had before. But Anya didn't give up. She showed up every day, learned their names, remembered their stories, fought for the resources they needed, and slowly they began to trust her. A 15-year-old girl dealing with her father's alcoholism started coming to her office just to talk. A 12-year-old boy struggling with anger issues asked if she'd attend his basketball games. An 8-year-old who'd witnessed domestic violence drew her a picture and shyly handed it over during lunch. The work was exhausting and heartbreaking and absolutely fulfilling. For the first time since she could remember, Anya felt like herself, like the person she'd always meant to be before Byron had convinced her she was worthless. Kellen visited the foundation once a week, ostensibly to check on operations, but really, Anya suspected, to check on her. He'd walk through the building, speak with staff, and always end up in her small office with its cluttered desk and walls covered in children's artwork. They'd talk about the programs, about funding needs, about specific cases that required additional resources. He never micromanaged, never questioned her decisions. He just listened and provided whatever support she needed. Their relationship had settled into something comfortable but undefined, more than friendship certainly. The way Kellen looked at her had changed over the months, grown warmer, more intense. The way her heart raced when she heard his voice. The way conversations stretched long into the evening when he'd drive her home. Neither of them quite ready to say goodbye. But neither had pushed for more, both seeming content to let whatever was building between them develop naturally, until tonight. It was late Friday evening, nearly 8 o'clock. The foundation had closed hours ago, but Anya had stayed to finish paperwork for a grant application. She was locking up when Kellen's SUV pulled up to the curb. Rory was behind the wheel as usual, and Kellen emerged from the back seat, looking relaxed in dark jeans and a fitted black shirt. "Working late again?" he asked, though his tone suggested he already knew the answer. "Grant deadline is Monday. I wanted to get ahead of it." Anya shouldered her bag, suddenly aware of how tired she was. "What are you doing here?" "Picking you up. You shouldn't be walking to the bus stop this late." He held the back door open. "Come on, I'll take you home." Anya slid into the SUV, sinking into the familiar leather seats. Kellen settled in beside her, and Rory pulled smoothly into traffic. The city lights streamed past the windows, painting everything in gold and shadow. "How's the grant application going?" Kellen asked. "Good, really good actually. If we get it, we can expand our counseling services by 30%, hire 2 more licensed therapists, extend evening hours." Anya felt herself relax, the tension of the long week starting to ease. "There's so much need, Kellen. Every week we have families asking for help, and I have to put them on a waiting list. It kills me." "I know." His voice was soft. "That's why you're so good at this. You actually care." "Don't you?" "Of course. But I care because it's the right thing to do." "You care because you see yourself in those kids. You understand their pain." He turned to look at her, his steel-gray eyes reflecting the passing streetlights. "You've changed since you started working there. Become more confident. More yourself." Anya felt warmth spread through her chest. "I feel like myself again. Like I'm finally doing what I was meant to do." She paused, then added quietly, "Thank you for giving me this chance." "You earned it." Kellen's gaze was intense now, focused entirely on her. "Everything you've accomplished, every kid you've helped, that's all you. I just opened the door." The SUV had turned onto the highway, the route to her apartment longer this way but smoother. Rory had the privacy screen partially up, giving them a bubble of semi-privacy in the back seat. The city sprawled below them, millions of lights in the darkness. "Can I tell you something?" Kellen's voice was different now, lower, almost vulnerable. Anya's pulse quickened. "Always. When I got your text that night, I thought it was a trap. I've made a lot of enemies over the years, and using someone in danger as bait is a classic move. But something about the way it was worded, the desperation in it, felt real." He looked out the window, his profile sharp in the dim light. "I came prepared for violence. Brought 4 men, had backup waiting. I was ready for anything except what I actually found." "Which was? You." He turned back to her, and the intensity in his eyes made her breath catch. This terrified woman who'd sent a message to the wrong person and somehow ended up with me. You should have been just another rescue, another situation handled and moved on from, but you weren't. Anya's heart was pounding now. "What was I?" Kellen moved closer, his voice dropping to barely above a whisper. "You were everything I didn't know I was looking for. This brave, brilliant woman who'd survived hell and was still fighting to help others, who looked at my world, at all the danger and darkness, and chose to step into it anyway." His hand came up to cup her face, his thumb brushing her cheekbone. "You're the center I never knew I was missing, Anya. The one good, pure thing in a life built on violence and compromise." Anya felt tears prick her eyes, but they weren't tears of sadness. They were tears of recognition, of finally hearing someone see her the way she'd always wanted to be seen. "Kellen, I know the timing isn't perfect. I know I'm not what you probably dreamed of when you thought about your future. But I need you to know how I feel, how I've felt since the moment I saw you in that bathroom, broken but not defeated." His voice was rough with emotion. "You've become essential to me, and I don't want to pretend otherwise anymore." The space between them seemed to shrink, charged with 3 months of building tension, of careful restraint finally breaking. Anya reached up and covered his hand with hers, holding it against her face. "You're not what I dreamed of," she whispered. "You're better. You're real." Kellen's eyes darkened, and then he was kissing her. Not gentle, not tentative, but with the full force of everything he'd been holding back. His hands tangled in her hair, pulling her closer, and Anya melted into him, into the heat and intensity and absolute certainty of it. She kissed him back with equal passion, pouring 3 months of growing feelings into it. Her hands found the hard muscle of his shoulders, felt the tension in his body, the barely controlled strength. This was dangerous and reckless and absolutely right. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Kellen rested his forehead against hers. "I'm all in," he said quietly. "Whatever this is, whatever we become, I'm all in." Anya smiled, feeling more alive than she had in years. "So am I." The SUV continued its path through the city, but everything felt different now. Kellen kept her close, his arm around her shoulders, her head resting against his chest, where she could hear the steady beat of his heart. Neither of them spoke for several minutes, both processing the shift that had just occurred between them. When Rory finally pulled up to her apartment building, Kellen walked her to the door like he always did. But this time, he kissed her again before she went inside, slower and deeper, a promise of everything to come. "I'll see you tomorrow," he murmured against her lips. "Tomorrow," Anya agreed, and watched him return to the SUV, feeling like she was floating. The next 2 weeks were a careful dance of building something real. Kellen took her to dinner at quiet restaurants, where the staff knew him by name and never asked questions. They walked through the city at night, Rory always a discreet distance behind, talking about everything from philosophy to their favorite childhood memories. He brought her books he thought she'd like, remembered details from conversations weeks old, made her laugh with dry observations about the world around them. But Anya also started seeing the reality of his life more clearly. The late-night phone calls he'd step away to take, his expression hardening as he dealt with some crisis. The nights when he'd text that he couldn't make their plans, no explanation given but something dark in the brevity of his message. The way men approached him on the street, with deference bordering on fear. One evening, he showed up at her apartment with bruised knuckles and a cut above his eyebrow. He'd tried to hide it, but Anya had seen immediately. "What happened?" she'd asked, pulling him inside. "Business dispute. It's handled." His voice had been clipped, distant. She'd cleaned the cut silently, her hands steady even as her heart raced. This was the reality she'd accepted. The violence wasn't theoretical anymore. It was literally written on his skin. "Does it scare you?" Kellen had asked quietly, watching her work. "Yes," Anya had answered honestly, "but not in the way you think. I'm not scared of you. I'm scared of losing you." He'd pulled her close then, held her until the tension left his body. "You won't. I'm careful. I'm smart. And I have good people watching my back." 3 weeks after that night in the SUV, Kellen asked her to move in with him. They were having dinner at his place, a penthouse apartment Anya had visited several times now. It was spacious and modern, with panoramic views of the city and security measures that would make a bank vault jealous. The decor was masculine, but not cold, with comfortable furniture and subtle personal touches that revealed more about him than he probably realized. Books on Irish history, a photograph of a woman Anya assumed was his mother, a battered leather journal on his desk. "I want you here," Kellen said over wine and the pasta he'd made himself. "Not visiting, living, making this your home as much as mine." Anya had known this was coming, had felt it building. "What about my apartment?" "Keep it if you want, or let it go, whatever makes you comfortable." He reached across the table and took her hand. "But I want to wake up with you here. I want you safe behind these walls. I want this to be real, Anya, fully real." She'd said yes without hesitation. Moving in took less than a day. Anya didn't have much, had left most of her old life behind when she'd escaped Byron. Her clothes, her books, a few personal items. Kellen had insisted she make the space her own, told her to change anything she wanted. But truthfully, the apartment already felt like home. The first morning she woke up in Kellen's bed, sunlight streaming through the tall windows. She felt a peace she'd forgotten was possible. He was already awake, propped up on one elbow, watching her with an expression of such tender possessiveness that it made her chest ache. "Good morning," he murmured, brushing hair back from her face. "Good morning." She smiled, stretching. "Do you always watch people sleep? That's slightly creepy." "Only you, and only because I keep expecting to wake up and find this was a dream." His voice was serious despite the lightness of his words. Living with Kellen meant understanding the full scope of his world. That evening, he brought her into his study where two men were waiting. She recognized Rory immediately, but the other man was new, older, probably in his late 50s, with salt and pepper hair and sharp blue eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. "Anya, this is Donovan," Kellen said, his hand warm on the small of her back. "He manages the financial side of all our operations, legitimate and otherwise. Donovan, this is Anya Solis." Donovan stood and offered his hand, his grip firm but not aggressive. "Miss Solis, I've heard a great deal about you." "All good, I hope," Anya replied, taking in the expensive suit, the leather briefcase, the way he carried himself with quiet authority. "Nothing but." Donovan's smile was genuine. "Kellen speaks very highly of your work at the foundation." They settled into the study, and Anya watched as the three men discussed business. It was fascinating and slightly terrifying. Donovan presented financial reports with the precision of a corporate accountant, but the numbers represented things Anya could only guess at: shipments, territories, payoffs, investments both legal and decidedly not. Rory reported on personnel issues, disputes that had been settled, potential problems on the horizon. His military background was evident in how he spoke, concise and factual, no emotion wasted, and Kellen listened to it all, asked pointed questions, made decisions with calm authority. This was the man who controlled an empire, and watching him work was like seeing a different side of him entirely. Still the man she loved, but also someone capable of wielding enormous power without hesitation. "What do you think?" Kellen asked her later, after Rory and Donovan had left. They were in the living room, her feet tucked under her on the couch, his arm around her shoulders. The city glittered below them, oblivious to the conversations that shaped its darker corners. "I think it's more complex than I imagined," Anya answered honestly. "All the moving parts, the strategy, the balance between legitimate business and everything else." "Does it bother you, seeing it up close?" She considered the question carefully. "I'd be lying if I said it didn't concern me, but I also see how carefully you manage it, how you protect your people, how you have rules and boundaries even in a world without many rules." She turned to look at him. "You're not a monster, Kellen. You're a man doing what he thinks he has to do in impossible circumstances." He kissed her forehead, and she felt some of the tension leave his body. "I never wanted you to see me as a monster. I don't. I never could." The days settled into a rhythm. Anya would go to the foundation, pour her heart into helping those kids, and come home to Kellen. Some nights he'd be there waiting, cooking dinner, or ordering in, ready to hear about her day. Other nights he'd be out handling business, returning late with that look in his eyes that said violence had been necessary. She learned not to ask for details, learned that her role wasn't to judge or approve, but simply to be there, to be the soft place he could return to after dealing with the hard edges of his world. Brenna visited once, her eyes wide as she took in the penthouse. The obvious wealth, the security. She'd pulled Anya aside in the kitchen. "Are you sure about this?" her sister had asked quietly. "About him?" "I've never been more sure of anything," Anya had answered. And it was true. Every wall of self-doubt Byron had built, every lie about her worthlessness, had crumbled completely. In Kellen's eyes, she saw herself as she truly was. Strong, capable, worthy of love and protection, someone who mattered. She was no longer the broken woman who'd sent a desperate text to a wrong number. She was Anya Solis, counseling coordinator, partner to one of the most powerful men in the city, and finally, completely, herself. 6 months had passed since that desperate night in the bathroom. 6 months since a panicked, mistyped message had changed everything. Anya marked the milestone quietly, not mentioning it to anyone, but aware of how far she'd come. The foundation was thriving, her work with the kids more fulfilling than she'd ever imagined. Her relationship with Brenna was stronger than ever. And Kellen, complicated and dangerous and absolutely devoted, had become the center of her world just as she'd become the center of his. She'd expected the day to be like any other. Work at the foundation, dinner with Kellen, maybe watching a movie curled up on the couch. But when she came home that Friday evening, she knew immediately that something was different. The penthouse was transformed. Soft light filled every corner, not from the usual lamps, but from what must have been 100 candles placed throughout the space. The harsh edges of the modern apartment had been softened with arrangements of white roses, her favorite flower, a detail she'd mentioned once in passing months ago. The city lights twinkled beyond the windows, but inside, everything glowed with warm, intimate light. "Kellen," Anya called out, setting down her bag, her heart already racing. He appeared from the bedroom, and her breath caught. He wore dark slacks and a crisp white shirt, the sleeves rolled up to reveal his tattooed forearms. His hair was styled back, his steel gray eyes focused entirely on her, with an intensity that made her knees weak. "You're home," he said, moving toward her. "Good. What is all this?" Anya gestured to the transformed space, feeling tears already threatening. "Kellen, this is beautiful." "It's nowhere near beautiful enough for what I'm about to ask you." He took her hands, his thumbs brushing over her knuckles. "But it's a start." Anya's heart was pounding so hard she could barely breathe. She'd known this was coming, had felt it building for weeks, but the reality of it was overwhelming. "6 months ago today, you sent a text message meant for your sister," Kellen began, his voice steady but thick with emotion. A desperate plea for help from a woman who thought she had no options left, who believed she was going to die in that bathroom. "You hit send, and it came to me. A complete stranger. A wrong number." Tears were streaming down Anya's face now, but she couldn't look away from his eyes. "I've spent a lot of time thinking about that night, about all the things that had to go exactly right for that message to reach me, about what would have happened if you'd typed one different digit, if you'd reached someone who didn't care or didn't have the resources to help." His grip on her hands tightened slightly. "About all the ways I could have lost you before I ever knew you." "But you didn't," Anya whispered. "No, I didn't." And every day since then has been about proving to both of us that what happened wasn't random chance. It wasn't an accident. He released her hands and slowly, deliberately, lowered himself to one knee. Anya's breath stopped entirely. From his pocket, Kellen pulled out a small velvet box. He opened it to reveal a ring that made her gasp. A simple band of platinum with a single perfect diamond, elegant and timeless, not ostentatious, not overstated, just absolutely right. "Anya Solis," Kellen said, his voice rougher now, stripped of all the careful control he usually maintained. "You walked into my life broken and afraid, and somehow, impossibly, you became the strongest person I know. You took a wrong number and turned it into something right. You took my world, with all its darkness and danger, and found light in it. You saw me, really saw me, and didn't run." He paused, and Anya saw his jaw tighten with emotion. "I'm not a good man," I've done things that would horrify you. I live in a world where violence is currency and trust is rare. But with you, I want to be better. You make me want to build something that lasts, something good, something worth protecting." He held up the ring. "Let me spend the rest of my life proving that one panicked wrong number wasn't an accident. It was fate. It was the universe telling me that you were always meant to be mine, and I was always meant to keep you safe." Anya was sobbing now, her whole body shaking with the force of her emotions. 6 months ago, she'd been convinced she was going to die. She'd sent that message with no real hope, just a last desperate attempt to reach someone who cared. And somehow, impossibly, it had led her here. To this man, this moment, this life she'd never dared to dream of. "Marry me, Anya. Be my wife. Be the protected center of my dangerous world. Let me wake up next to you for the rest of my life, and know that something I did, somewhere along the way, was right enough to deserve you." The answer came from somewhere deep in her soul, from the part of her that had survived Byron, that had found the courage to send that text, that had chosen to step into Kellen's world despite all the risks. "Yes," she said through her tears. "Yes, yes, yes." Kellen's hands shook slightly as he slid the ring onto her finger, a perfect fit. Then he was standing, pulling her into his arms, kissing her with a passion that spoke of relief and joy and absolute certainty. Anya kissed him back, pouring everything she felt into it. Love and gratitude and fierce determination to build this life they were choosing together. When they finally broke apart, Kellen rested his forehead against hers, his arms tight around her waist, as if he'd never let go. "I love you," he said, the words simple but weighted with everything they meant. "From the moment I saw you in that bathroom, I knew you were going to change my life. I just didn't know how completely." "I love you too," Anya replied, her voice steady despite her tears. "You saved me, Kellen. Not just that night, but every day since. You gave me back myself." "No." He pulled back just enough to look into her eyes. "You saved yourself. You sent that text. You chose to fight. You chose to survive. You chose this life. I just made sure you had the chance." Rory appeared from somewhere in the apartment, discreet as always, with champagne and 2 glasses. He set them on the table with a genuine smile. "Congratulations, boss, Miss Solis." His voice was warm, happy for them both. "Or should I say, future Mrs. Reardon." Anya laughed through her tears, the sound bright and free. Mrs. Reardon. 6 months ago she'd been trapped and broken, convinced she had no future. Now she was engaged to one of the most powerful men in the city, doing work she loved, surrounded by people who genuinely cared about her. They toasted with champagne as the candles flickered around them, and the city stretched out below, full of secrets and shadows and possibilities. Kellen kept one arm around her waist, holding her close, and Anya leaned into him, feeling safer than she'd ever felt in her life. "What happens now?" she asked softly. Kellen smiled, a rare, genuine expression that transformed his usually guarded face. "Now we build our future, together. You keep changing lives at the foundation. I keep my people safe and my business running. And we come home to each other every night and remember that sometimes the best things in life start with a wrong number." Anya looked at the ring on her finger, at the man holding her, at the beautiful life stretching out before them. She thought about that terrified woman in the bathroom, about the desperate message sent with shaking hands, about all the impossible chances that had aligned to bring her here. "Not a wrong number," she said, meeting Kellen's eyes. "The right number. It was always the right number." He kissed her again as the candles burned low and the city glowed around them, 2 people who'd found each other in the darkness and chosen to build something lasting in the light. The broken woman and the crime boss, bound together by chance and choice, and a love that had survived everything thrown at it. And as Anya stood in Kellen's arms, wearing his ring, surrounded by proof of his devotion, she knew with absolute certainty that she'd finally found what she'd been searching for all along. Not just safety or protection or escape, but home. Real, true, permanent home in the heart of the most dangerous man she'd ever known. The wrong number had led her exactly where she was always meant to be. Thank you for staying with me until the very end of this incredible journey. If this story touched your heart, wait until you see what's coming next. It's even more powerful and inspiring than you can imagine. So don't go anywhere. Click on that video showing on your screen right now to dive into another amazing story that will absolutely blow your mind. Trust me, you won't regret it.